Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Tough Talking Thursday. On this Thursday, March 10, 2022, my name is Dennis Jai, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. In this edition of Tough Talking Thursday, we're going to be going through some current issues that are trending in Liberia, starting with the government of Liberia domestic debt payment, the ANC and the LP, their MOU, which is in some form of dispute. There is a 15-year tax break for a company, manual manufacturing company. And so we're going to be talking about those and much more. My guest, I have FOL political analyst, Mr. Mohamed Sherif. Mr. Sherif, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you, Dennis. Thanks for having me.
I also have Mr. Josh Preston Sir Lobbo. I want to include that name, Sir. Sir is joining us. He's a member of the JMB team. That's Team JMB. He's also the host of The Drive. Mr. Lobbo, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Dennis, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here once again today.
We want to welcome all our viewers from across the globe. This is another edition of Tough Talking Thursday. We are here to talk tough. And if time permits, we're also going to talk about the Air France likely pull out from Liberia. It looks like some people are celebrating this, while some people are sad. We're going to look into that closely and analyze it. I have the team here to do that. Again, invite a friend and let's get this started. You are missing some people tonight. Of those that you are missing, you have Mr. Wilmot Wetty Cooney, and who is our chief political analyst. He's not here tonight. Also, Mrs. Cole Famler is not with us due to other issues. For Mr. Cooney, he is observing his 38th wedding anniversary. And so we at Focus on Liberia want to join our chief political analyst to say happy 28th wedding anniversary to the chief political analyst, Mr. Wilmot Wetty Cooney, and his beautiful wife, Mrs. Cooney. We want to say we love you all, and thank you so much for holding everything down. And according to Mr. Cooney, it's all love that kept them going.
A bit of bigger ball.
That's our chief political analyst, and we say a shout out. Gentlemen, a lot of things going on quickly. Let's go through these things. I want us to start with Air France likely pull out. I want us to give 5 minutes to that. Transport Minister was in France. He was in France to talk about this and say, well, France said we're going to pull out of Air France, said they're pulling out. And he went there. From what we learned, it is likely that they pull out. What did you hear? Let me start with Mr. Lobbo.
So Dennis, I mean, it's concerning, but it is not coming as a surprise. Having flown Air France a couple of times to Liberia, when you get to Monrovia, the Roberts International Airport, from the management, the staff, those at the airport, the conditions at the airport is one that will make any serious airline to rethink its business strategy with Liberia. Having said that, Air France is a very unique airline, flies to so many major destinations. I think for the Liberian government, that is something they should have cherished and should have done everything to ensure that their airport was in proper condition. You know, Mr. Jai, there have been series of incidents that have preceded at the airport, ranging from strike, people on the tarmac, the issue of lack of electricity. I mean, the conditions at the airport, horrible. The RIA have been on a terrible managerial leadership at the airport. So for me, it's not coming as a surprise. But what I read today was that there could be a change in the plan where maybe the flight could be, I think, 2 or 3 times a week. However, those were some of the business opportunities. I hope the government will be able to prepare for shock. Knowing the government, I just say overall to those Liberians that were working with Air France, I mean, whenever you have a business slow down or changes its strategy, If there's an effect, we can ignore that. That means the number of passengers that were coming to Liberia, the money that were being collected at the RIA will decrease. So it will affect our revenue. It will impact the government's pocket a little bit. So that's the concern. Who bears the burden? The ordinary Liberians. That's all I would say, Mr. Jah. Muted.
Mr. Sherif, there was a report that at one point, I think a plane was diverted because there was no electricity. So all these things put together, and Air France said we're not going to be going through this, we're leaving. But what I saw from what I read, and this is typical of politics, we saw some jubilation from the opposition camp because people want to say, I told you so. What you make of it that when a government and politicians do that, right? You want to see the other government fail so that you will be the one. But this affects all of us, and it is Liberia that suffers. Even with this political, yeah, we told you so, we told you, Judge, we couldn't do it. What you make of the jubilation from other quarters to make sure that things are not working to prove the point that Mr. Weah is not capable and therefore an opposition leader should take over?
It is Liberia that suffers ultimately. I'm not clear on the specifics of the Air France pullout, but as you mentioned, Air France has threatened to pull out of the Roberts International Airport, and this has been a cause for jubilation or celebration in the ranks of the opposition. Of course, the opposition is going to celebrate the failure of this administration, but they have to be very careful. You don't want to be seen as completely negative when in fact there are individuals whose lifelines, whose jobs are affected. These are ordinary Liberians who were taking care of their families. Definitely, they are part of the Liberian tax base. If nothing else, they have families. I mean, each individual can potentially have, based on our extended family system, each of these individuals can have from 5 to 10 people that they support, and I'm talking family members. And so the opposition does not want to be seen as, celebrating the loss of jobs. I think what they need to do is to criticize the incompetence of the administration. Time and time and again, we've on this show, we've criticized the administration not for the fact that that are in particular not a member of the CDC, but because of some of the things that you're seeing now. A flight was diverted recently to Sierra Leone, to Freetown, Sierra Leone. Dennis, imagine. So we got a flight being diverted from Africa's oldest country going to neighboring Sierra Leone. Can you imagine this? This is inexcusable. And this is what we're talking about. And so in any other country, right, where we are in the United States, that happens. This is a cause for a hearing, a congressional hearing on Capitol Hill. But you know what goes on our Capitol Hill? Fights. Okay.
There was a hearing, Mr. Sherif. There was a congressional hearing for the gender minister. So it's not.
There was a congressional hearing with the gender minister about what?
The high incidences of rape.
But I'm talking about I'm talking about the particular case where the flight was diverted to Freetown, to the Lungi Airport in Freetown. I don't remember a congressional hearing.
No,
and so these Congress people, the president is culpable. The Liberian congressional members are culpable. Our judiciary is culpable. So everybody, from the top of the administrative ladder to the bottom of the ladder, everybody is culpable. The opposition does not say anything. So we have an opposition that doesn't say anything in the right direction. So I would love to see the opposition engage the administration time and time and again on its failure to develop the country. This is inexcusable, Dennis. So now you have the airport. The next thing you're going to have is, well, you've had JFK for a long time, which is not serving the Liberian people. Our officials of government, our government officials are going to Ghana and other places for medical checkups. And so what you see at RIA is just in addition to all of the failures that have been going on. And by the way, it's not just limited to this administration. George Weah inherited some of these things, or a lot of these things. He just don't know what to do with it.
Yeah. Okay. Just to bring our listener up to speed, what we read from the Observer newspaper is the Transport Minister Sam Glou was in France to talk about this, and but things look like things did not materialize, and the pullout is likely, so they are still negotiating. So the French airliner is reportedly cutting off Liberia as of March 28 due to poor quality of services at the RIA, which include dark runway, lack of electricity, and then there are few being jet fueling. They also say these challenges faced by the airline Liberia has been compounded by the crisis in Mali, because the airline service to Liberia is just a continuation to Mali. So if Mali is cut off, definitely there are going to be problem.
And just before we navigate,
as a case in point, in January, Air France left hundreds of passengers stranded at RIA for 2 days in a row due to technical faults on the plane and the poor quality of jet fuel. So Air France said we've had enough. Go ahead, Mr. Sherif.
And just before we navigate off of this this subject, so we're talking about the Roberts International Airport. We haven't even begun to look at, internally in the interior of the country, whether the airport in Vonjema. Some of these airports are unusable now, whether the airport in Sanikoli or Zwedru, for example, or Greenville. Some of these airports are unusable now. They cannot be used. Dennis, when we were kids and we will go to the airfield to welcome these ministers, the president when Doe arrived, and or some of his ministers will arrive, and we go to the airport. I mean, during those days, those airports were serviceable. They were serviceable. Yeah. So you could go to the airport. I mean, so you have flights. People could go from Zwedru to Monrovia. You could fly from Zwedru to Monrovia if you could afford, and you didn't want to take you didn't want to ride take the car to Monrovia. So what I'm saying here is that where is the vision? Where is the vision to ensure that not only we're not just only looking at Roberts International Airport. This is the third administration after the Civil War, and we're still talking about Roberts International Airport. We're not even talking about the airport in Sanikoli, the airport in Vonjema, the local, the regional airport in Zwedru or Greenville or Harper. We're not even talking about those. We're talking about Roberts International Airport that we cannot even maintain. This is shameful. And again, George Weah currently is the president of the Republic of Liberia, but this does not stop with George Weah. I mean, there needs to be a vision. I hope there's a vision. I hope the opposition has a vision, not only to take care of the Roberts International Airport, but to ensure that the transportation sector of the Liberian nation state is developed in a way that if I want to fly to Zwedru, all I need. So if I'm teaching at the community college in Zwedru and I want to come to Monrovia and for some reason and just run right back, I can fly back and forth. But that is not possible now because of the fact that we are stalled. We are stalled since the Civil War, or perhaps since 1980. There has been this slow decline in the Liberian transportation sector.
Thank you, Mr. Sherif. Let me go to Mr. Lobbo to conclude on this. Mr. Lobbo and Mr. Sherif made a point. This is not new. How did the Unity Party government leave the airport? Now we are having people leaving. What's going on here?
So, Mr. Sherif, Mr. Sherif and Mr. Jai, I think it's a good thing that when we discuss these issues, it's good when we look at regimes after regime. Yeah. We can go back as far as the World War II or the Cold War when that airport was really efficient. Ever since then, the Unity Party government decided to upgrade the airport. We must not forget, Mr. Sherif, it was under the UP administration that we took a $60 million loan from the Bank of China, where we resurfaced the runway for the very first time in a very long time. Not only that, what they inherited from us was the first international standard terminal, what they have today, that they've not been able to maintain. The problem, Air France have been going to Liberia recently with no complaint. Recently is where Air France is talking about the services being provided to them. Look, we all know that given the infrastructure deficit that we inherited in 2006, no one can tell you that we made no progress to improve the country. Mr. Sherif, I will say this. I departed Liberia December 26, 2006. I know what Liberia was. So again, I didn't expect to see Yokohama in 12 years. I didn't expect to see Shanghai in 12 years. But what the CDC inherited was a working progress. Sadly for the Liberian people, instead of making progress, President Weah have put the country in reverse and is sitting at his studio recording songs. That is the tragedy about this government. Mr. Sherif, let's be honest here. Everyone was boasting and showcasing the airport, the terminals. Today, you won't believe it. The jet walk does not even work. We have to get on the bus and go to the flight, the plane itself. So what happened to this government? What is it this government inherited that they've been able to manage properly? When we inherited Liberia, Mr. Sherif, on the issue of electricity, the United Party inherited Liberia with 0 megawatts of power. 0 megawatts of power. With all our power lines down. Before we left power, we gave President Weah a hydro dam with 88 megawatts. So we just can't continue to find a way to shape the problems. The expectation from us was that President Weah would have been saying, "Oh, I'm about to construct a new dam that will increase the capacity of the energy supply." But imagine, Mr. Sherif, ECOWAS parliamentarians were at the ministerial complex. That again is something we left. A $60 million project. Again, no electricity. At what point in time does this government take responsibility? At what point in time Liberians begin to say that, I think this government just don't have the ability to do anything. They just can't. So, Mr. Sherif, the Unity Party, I agree. This is why we did not make excuses. We can sit there and say, what did the UP inherit? We did not inherit Liberia and Medicine Table project ongoing. We inherited Liberia with the largest amount of infrastructure deficit after the war. But yet then when you come to power, the expectation is that you will do better than your predecessor. Yeah. Sadly for the Liberian people, George Weah and his team have not been able to live up to the task. This is why we have airlines pulling out. This is why we have international partners are holding meeting at the ministerial complex and there's no electricity. Look at the streets of Monrovia today. Think about it, Mr. Sherif. The government incompetent. Yet then the government continued to tell us that they are recording record-breaking revenue. How can you record record-breaking revenue, but you are indebted to the Côte d'Ivoire for $10 million? Yeah. Come on, what sense does it make? You are recording budget surplus here and there. So
we call that two economics.
You say what?
Two economics.
You see. So my point here, Mr. Sherif, it is true that there have been problems ongoing. But the expectation is that every government that comes to power should be able to take the country a step further. Sadly for the Liberian people, this government have not been able to move the government in the forward march direction. So we are retrogressing instead of making progress. And that is the tragedy about this government.
Thank you. And another thing is what you, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And what you mentioned, George, is that,
Mr. Sherif, 30 seconds. I want to move to the next issue. We have a lot here.
Sure. What you mentioned, you're absolutely right. I mean, every administration should build on the progress of the last administration before it. But that doesn't seem to be happening. All I was saying is that the progress, the last what is it now, 20, 3 decades or nearly since the Civil War ended. I mean, it's not been enough. It's not been enough. I mean, we can't be talking about roads that are impossible from Monrovia to Greenville. I mean, it's inexcusable. We know that Charles Taylor was not interested at all in development. What Charles Taylor was interested in was just murder and just sheer tyranny. So I'm going to really not consider him at all in my overall evaluation matrix because he was not serious. I mean, he was not a leader. Unfortunately, the Liberian people elected him. So, but we are where we are. And George Weah is supposed to, these guys are supposed to do something. And it's not really hard. It's
Thank
not
you,
hard.
Mr. Sherif. Thank you. We got to move on to our next issue here, which is the government of Liberia domestic debt payment. On the internet, we saw this debt going around, and it was published on the site Facebook account of Senator Darius DeLange. And what he was saying was, he said, how come the current fiscal budget carries 84 million domestic debt when the past 2021 budget stayed at 72 million? It's like this thing is not coming down. Our debt is still there. And he was saying the 84 million is a bulk blank check, in my view. Let them break it down. So when you look, you saw some of the debt payment. I know you read it. Some of this, you will see something like this. People that the government owe and how much. And the one that caused a lot of people to be questioning is the one that was paid to a group called Propo Media. And, okay, so you have this. You have the debt payment. So what the senator is saying is break it down. And again, two things here. I want to start with you, Mr. Lobbo, is our legislators always approving budgets, right? And these things are there. And now Mr. Dillon is saying, hey, we can give you a blank check, break down what these things for, who is being paid, why they are being paid, what qualified them to receive this. What you make of this? And then, first of all, this is coming from the government of Liberia. It's kind of little. I don't know how it worked before. This is the first time I'm seeing a list of debt. You study these things more, you look at them more, Georgie. Tell me about this whole concept of domestic debt. We get a list. What has been done from as far back as 2005, as you remember?
Mr. Ja, I am still very close to the three former finance ministers, Gov't, Amara, and that of Boyman Kamara. I'm close to people within the current finance ministry. The very first thing I've been very clear about is this. The CDC government, when they came to power, Mr. Sherif just picking up on where we left off when we talk about building on what you inherited. The guys have forgotten. Part of the reason why Liberia was able to secure that HAPEC initiative debt waiver, there were requirements, and part of those requirements was to establish credible, independent, anti-graft institutions. And some of those institutions brought into play the reforms you saw at the Ministry of Finance, at the Central Bank, the establishment of the PPCC, the Good Governance, all these different commissions. Now, there's something at the Ministry of Finance, and Mr. Jai, when you want, I can send it to you. There's the Public Financial Management Act. And one of the major things that I've seen since this government came to power is there have been complete total disregard of that. And what does that mean? So in the Public Financial Management Act, it states clearly when a budget should be submitted, what the format in which it should be submitted. Now, the CDC under George Weah, since Samuel Tuah came to power, he has yet to submit a budget on time. That's impossible. So that itself is a gross violation of the law. Now, some of the things I saw listed, I'm not seeing them being listed like that in the budget. Now, Mr. Jai, here's my take about Liberia and under this government. The Code of Conduct, which I strongly believe was used as a toilet paper by the CDC government, so it does not exist anymore. This is why there's a gross violation of the rule of law. For a government that is submitting budget and is telling us about domestic debt services, Mr. Jai, this is the legislature. There should be clear, explicit creditors that we owe, that the people should know. Mr. Jah, this is not the first time. The reason why I frown at our lawmakers is that I don't like this showcase legislature thing that they do. Because there have been a lot of time that my own lawmakers, even from the Unity Party, that I frown on. So even the Darius Dillon. This is not the first time. If you approve $72 million for domestic debt services without seeing the actual breakdown, then what does that say about the legislature? What does that say about you guys? And this is where the Liberian people need to understand, Mr. Jack. The people we send to Congress, those we elect to represent us, they matter. Because we have people at the Capitol building who have no understanding of some of these issues. So again, Mr. Jack, honor the proper government. Don't use this government to measure any normal functioning government. I will say it again. There have been a lot of things that have been done differently under this government. So again, if the lawmakers are serious, this is the time for them to ask them for the detail. But this is not the first time I will say this. This is the only legislature that have approved a $25 million stimulus package while it was still a draft. That itself tells you about the legislature. Without no details. They say, oh, we just approved a draft. Who approves a draft without a detailed breakdown of the expenditure and how the money will be spent? So again, Mr. C, I just want to say to you, when you go through these numbers, it's just heartbreaking. But here's what the CDC guys have done. The guys have been very smart. Since they came to power, they created their own makeshift companies. The reason why they've not been able to give any details is because they are paying themselves to make their corruption look legal. So they have their own companies, so they are indebted to themselves. So they pay each other. This is why the Deputy Minister for Fiscal Affairs, he now owns over 5 different companies. The company that planted the light post, Minister Magay owns more than 50% shares in it. So these guys are allotting money to themselves. This is not the first time. Do you know, Dennis? Part of the
George, before you continue, are they alone? Because government.
No, they're not alone.
Exactly.
They're not alone. I want to be clear. I'm being very clear. But the point, with Dennis, I want us to know is that the government owes to its citizens. This is not just a one-man show. This is normal under this government. Buffer Chimos does have companies. Abochie, the Minister of Finance, almost every government officials. Do you know that $10 million was allotted for post-COVID recovery? That money, who then got that money up to today's day? They said if we know about it, then we know when Jesus will be coming. But let me end on this note that is very important. Mr. Jah, when a government does a recast of a budget, you do a recast because of 2 reasons. One, either your revenue exceeded your projections or your revenue did not meet your projections. So you do a recast to adjust your expenditure. Sadly for us, under the CDC government, Mr. Jah, the government, the Minister of Finance should always submit a budget performance review report. Mr. Sherif, maybe because I'm from the opposition, the day you found one that was presented by 12, let me know. I will leave Liberian politics. That's how I end.
Thank you, Mr. Sherif. I was going through the numbers, and the one that said Propo Media is the one that is making news in the air. But my point is, I mean, we have 3 branches of government.
Yeah.
I mean, who is working?
What's that again? I didn't get the question.
Working? Because this thing's supposed to be checked on, and you are approving a budget that you don't even see the details, the breakdown. So you are, it's like you are closing you are now building the fence after the guinea pigs have destroyed the rice.
Yeah, so I mean, they approved the legislature passed his budget without looking at these things. So I think there's a little bit of grandstanding going on by Darius Dillon. I mean, how do you come on now to try to question while I do commend that, but why now? And for what? So let's look at, Liberia as a country that has had troubles with debt, both external and domestic. Liberia has always, for the most part, for a long time, has had debt, issues with debt. Remember, Dennis, we were told in grade school that President Roy, because he borrowed money from England, that's what we were told when we were grade school kids. But later on, we know that there were other issues. So what I'm saying here is that E.J. Roy in 1870 borrowed money, $500,000 from the British. And the coup that was concocted against Roy, this 500,000, this loan was kind of used as a pretext for that. And in 1911, Liberia was on the brink of a financial collapse. And the Liberian Congress, the Liberian government sought assistance from the United States. And the United States government came in with $1.7 million. And so you fast forward to, Charles King administration is selling, Liberians to the Spanish to service some of Liberia's debts, or you come to Tubman, who was borrowing a lot, and then Tolbert. So in 1980, at the coup in 1980, Liberia had a debt burden of $800 million. And so this was enormous, according to economists at the time. But get this, by 1990, Liberia had a $2 billion debt burden. Dennis, if you remember, I don't know if you remember, but I still remember.
We will pay.
What?
We will pay.
We will pay. We will pay America, right? I remember, going somewhere. I think I put in 25 cents. We were collecting money. The government was collecting money to pay America back, and we all were being patriots, and we were trying to assist our country to pay the American government back. But later on, what I realized was that was a charade, because the real issue at the time was that the government didn't know what they were doing. They were overspending. Corruption was at an all-time high, and there was no regards for fiscal responsibility. And so to the extent that the United States, President Doe, requested the American government to bring in financial experts to assist, he said, I don't know who to trust in my administration, so I need help. So these financial experts came to Monrovia. There were 17 experts who came to Monrovia and who were deployed in the Ministry of Finance and other strategic areas of the Liberian financial sector. And these experts put in place a real stringent financial measures, but the government didn't buy it because it was tough. And while the experts were in town, we saw brand new Mercedes in the hands of ministers. Every last one of them were riding around in brand new Mercedes Benz. And so these guys, coupled with all the other things that was going on, the fact that the president was really controlling the economy, they got so frustrated, they left. I believe they left in early 1989. I still remember, it was in February of 1989 when these guys left, and they threw their hands up and left. And so by the time the Civil War came around, Liberia was deep in debt, $200 million. And so fast forward, Civil War, Taylor did nothing. He just built up on what Doe did. And then up to 2010, I think Liberia was knee deep in debt. 4.6, I think 4.5 to 4.6.
4.9 billion.
4.9 billion?
Yes.
Thank you. 4.
And Mr. Sherif?
4.9, sorry about that, $4.9 billion debt. And so this is the history. And so the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf's government, to their credit, and with the goodwill of the international community, most of this, 90% of this debt was written off. So it was sort of like a clean start. And
right.
where my frustration...
Sherif, let me interrupt you a little bit. And most of these things were external debt. Now, what the current government is paying back, or the list here, is all domestic, which is more or less goods and services, things that we may not even need. Go ahead.
Right. So in order for our viewers to follow and understand with some clarity, we have to lay down some of the history of the Liberian debt crisis. Yes, Liberia has both foreign, external and domestic debt. To me, Dennis, and to segue a little bit into the domestic debt, I think George alluded to something. The domestic debt is where these guys are actually paying themselves. They are paying themselves.
Mr. Sherry, I wanted to ask something, saying he's muted, Dennis, real quick. Sherry spoke on something, and I just wanted to set the record straight on a few things. And if you do, Dennis, I can find it and send it to you. I have Liberia's total international debt stockpile from 1977. I have it. And for the records, our total debt 1980 was under 700 million, some 690 something. Yeah. That's where we were.
Good.
President, let me bring it. So I want to say something quick before Mr. Sherry jump in on something he's speaking about.
Because I wanted to ask you something, but go ahead.
Go for it if you want. Because
what I'm asking is, debt is not a bad thing for those who are doing accounting, right?
Absolutely.
Right. America or China or everybody. What makes our debt bad, especially with the one we see the global government put out?
So Dennis, here's what the debt is bad, and when Mr. Sherif spoke about that the country was on a serious burden. Normally, when you borrow, with countries that don't have the capital to invest in massive infrastructure projects or programs, the expectation is that you will borrow money, you will come and invest that money in your country, and over a period of time, those projects will yield a return to pay back the debt. Because when you borrow, Dennis, there's interest. We know that African countries are borrowing at a higher interest rate. So what good does it do, all President? We are wanted to borrow the Iboma loan to go build stadium in Grand Crew where there's less than 50,000 people there. So you see that.
Carry them there.
So again, so when Mr. Sherif speak about debt, now you imagine the PRC, you met a total debt of under 700 million. By the time you left, we're over almost 2.5 billion. But there is no development to be shown for even 1 billion under the PRC government. So what does that tell us, Mr. Jha? That we just take money to pay ourselves like the CDC. When CDC came to power, Dennis, the total debt they met, domestic and foreign, Mr. Sherif, $874 million. Today, as we speak, Liberia's total debt is approaching 1.7 billion. Can the CDC government show us development for $500 million over the last 4 years? Now, another thing Liberians need to pay attention to, Mr. Sherif. If the UP 12 years, we borrow under 900 million, and CDC in 4 years have pushed the debt to almost 1.7 billion. Imagine if the CDC was to go 12 years at this rate.
Yeah.
And they're using the money to pay themselves. So, Dennis, debt is not a bad thing. But again, in predatory lending, Dennis, it says the most important thing is the borrower's ability to repay. You can't borrow when you can't pay. Why in America they want to see your 2 pay stubs? They want to know if you have a job because you have to pay. Instead, under this government, the government is the only government that borrows to pay salaries. So I refer to them as the young man who borrows money to take his girlfriend on an expensive date. So they borrow money to buy big cars. They borrow money to to live comfortable life. There's no return on the investment. So that's the sad part about this debt. That's the tragedy about the debt.
Thank you, Mr. Sherif.
And Dennis, if I would just end the thought, you know, what I was expressing there, and George has already enumerated a lot of the points that I was trying to make. So I'm just going to make this brief. So the whole domestic debt issue, there's a problem with it, where you have, you know, officials of government who own these companies. So there's no sort of investigation. There's no ethical regards for which companies they're paying. So I can be a minister of government, I can be a member of the legislature and operate in 2, 3, 4, 5 companies. And, you know, through my connection with the government, I can ensure that the government pumps out money to all of these companies. It's about greed. It's reckless. It's wrong. It's unpatriotic, Dennis. This is the reason why. This is the very reason why the country is where it's at. This country is not poor. Liberia is not a poor country. No one should tell you that Liberia is poor. In fact, Liberia does not need a debt. You don't need to borrow money from multilateral institutions or bilateral institutions. You do not need to borrow money from China. You don't need to borrow money from the United States. You don't need to borrow money from the World Bank or IMF. You don't need all of that. Liberia can manage its own resources. If you can manage your own resources, Liberia has enough resources wherein they will not be able to borrow debt. So this is the kind of responsibility, the fiscal responsibility that needs to be applied. Not only the fiscal responsibility, but the patriotism, the political will has to be there in order for them to do these things. And another thing, they have to have the competence. These guys don't have the competence to do that. And that is the problem. And I don't think they're sitting there worrying about this. You and I are sitting here now talking about this because we are concerned, because we care. So the people that are running the country, they do not care one bit. They don't care about all of this that you're talking about. What they're saying now is you're wasting your time. You're wasting your time talking about all of this because the country is knee deep in debt. They're saying that they're not the first one to inherit debt and that everyone has debt. So they don't have any idea on how to resolve Liberia debt crisis. And debt, Dennis, is an existential threat to the development of the Liberian nation state because you're not going to be able to create full employment. You're not going to be able to build roads and schools and hospitals and clinics and all of that if the debt that you, George mentioned it, if the debt that you're borrowing from foreign countries and multilateral institutions, that's money, resources going back into your own pocket.
Yeah.
And that is a problem.
Mr. Sherif, Dennis, please give me 1 minute. I want to say something real quick. Very interesting. You see, Mr. Sherif, like Dennis said, that I look at the numbers. That's one thing I take pleasure in. And let me give you something that will blow your mind. So the CDC government under the special drawing right credit facility program with the IMF. The CDC borrows 150 million, Mr. Sherif, but will pay the World Bank back 213 million.
Wow.
Now, here's the irony about this thing, right? Every time 20 million gets disbursed, the seditious parade the principal streets of Monrovia, they hold a press conference because they have no understanding of what they're getting into. Now, Mr. Jah, here's the sorrowful part about this thing, and I will say this. When you borrow money, you must have the ability to repay. That money must be used to invest in projects or program that will yield returns. So what we are doing, we are taking on additional liabilities. We are accruing the interest over the time of the loan, but we don't have the ability to pay. It is detrimental to the growth and the survivability of the country. And I will tell the Liberian people, the sooner you get rid of the CDC, the better your life will be. George, we are staying beyond 2023. Yeah. It will be more than detrimental to your life. But Mr. Sherif, I will say this to you. Ambassador Boyka have made it very clear that for him, his goal, I spoke on fiscal discipline, is to make sure that Liberia can be sustained on its own resources. We want to get rid of aid because we believe that aid have not benefited us. People can't say they pledge money to us and they pay stuff.
Mr. Lobbo, where is that plan?
Oh, you have not heard that from him?
No, I'm not saying here.
Okay, like I told you, Mr. Jah, we will lay out a detailed plan for you guys. We can speak on the plan. I hope one of these days I come to Tough Talking Thursday to articulate our vision for the country and why we want to replace the CDC.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Addie Tyler from Pennsylvania, and you're watching Focus on Liberia.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This is Tough Talking Thursday, and Mr. Lobbo is going to come back so that we can see that imaginary plan, because we've been hearing about it. We want to see it, and we want to also see if Mr. Bwaka have a history of doing that. But we'll come to that. Let's go to our next issue, which is the Memorandum of Understanding that was signed or reportedly signed between the Alternative National Congress and the Liberty Party. That MOU, according to the Liberty Party chairman, has not yet been consummated. And so here is how it was reported in the news. It says, the Liberty Party to make final decision on endorsing ANC Alexander Cummings as chairman of the CPP at upcoming convention. There was a convention and we saw that the Liberty Party endorsed the CDC. So how this came to be, we started scratching our head. So the details we got, they said the party had earlier endorsed the standard bearer of the Alternative National Congress at its national convention in December 2020. But the press release that was put out by Mr. Ability and the Liberty Party noted that the party has not been able to consummate the relationship by executing the Memorandum of Understanding from the agreement reached and proffered during the Ganta Convention. So it was like, you know, you scratch my back, I scratch your back. But so since you have not done this, we are putting the final endorsement on hold. And then from what I learned, Mr. Ability appeared on social media in interviews and even double down on this thing. Mr. Sherif, I don't know if you're able to follow this development. What do you know about it?
A little bit. So Mr. Ability is saying that there is an MOU between the ANC and the Liberty Party, which he chairs. And so part of this MOU is some sort of understanding. The understanding is that they are going to endorse Mr. Cummings for president of Liberia, and Mr. Cummings is going to pick, because he eventually has to pick a vice presidential candidate. The understanding, from what I'm hearing, is that he is to pick someone from the Liberty Party, and potentially that will be Chairman Mohamed of the Liberty Party. But it has taken a while since, as you reported there, Dennis, it's taken a while now. The expectation was that that decision should have been made by now, and so they've waited. They've waited for a long time. They've been on all the while. They've been on Mr. Cummings' side everywhere, on the trail and in the courtroom at some times. And so Mr. Cummings, from the Liberty Party's Mr. Ability's point of view, is that he has not yet delivered. And so there is concern as far as the Liberty Party is concerned. And so what they're going to be doing, according to Mr. Ability, is to reassess their decision. So there will be a convention, a special convention, and in that convention, they're going to reassess the decision to endorse the ANC party leader, Alexander Cummings.
Mr. Sherif, before I go to Mr. Lobbo, what do you think is going on here? Because the Liberty Party has earlier endorsed Mr. Cummings, and at that time, it was not predicated upon any MOU. Probably it was in the meeting. And this is happening also, bear in mind that Mr. Bility has a piece of the Liberty Party.
Right.
So the Liberty Party has split in two.
Right.
And from what we heard before, it was the same reason why the Yombly faction was almost unendorsing Mr. Cummings, because they too, or Yombly, wanted to be vice president. So what do you think is going on here? I mean, I don't know if Mr. Cummings was thinking that he was going to get any endorsement free, and now the chicken is coming home to roast.
Yeah, I don't think Mr. Cummings, because Mr. Bility insists that Mr. Cummings is a good man. He doesn't have any personal problems with Mr. Cummings. He had high praises for Mr. Cummings. So I don't think that is the issue is Mr. Cummings. I think that the internal workings of the ANC, there are some issues going on behind the scenes within the ANC that are averse to picking Musa Bility as the vice standard bearer of the ANC. And so Mr. Cummings, it looks like he's under tremendous pressure to make that decision. And so Mr. Cummings, so this is the time of leadership. You know, people think that you can just go around and say, I am the party leader, I am the political leader. Being a political leader comes with a lot. There are times that you have to make decisions that are not popular. You have to make the decision that is right for that moment. So I think right now, Mr. Cummings is torn. You know, he has been endorsed by Musa Bility with, you know, the understanding or the expectation that something is coming, and that thing has not yet been delivered. And because of that, there is now a problem. And Dennis, if you ask me what is going to happen, I think again, we're going to see another fracture. Okay, so Mr. Bility, I'm here to predict that Mr. Bility is going to, sooner or later, he is now going to issue another statement after their convention to say that we are on endorsing, Mr. Cummings. And so there's going to be another fracture. So we haven't seen the last of the Liberty Party in terms of, disintegration, I should say, disintegrating from the middle. Mm-hmm. And so something else is coming. And what real quick, and what I would like to say about that is, if this was the understanding, it would not be fair to Musa Bility, who has gone on the limb to make this endorsement. And Dennis, I see you make fun of it there. You said half of the Liberty Party. Yeah. I don't think that goes down well with Mr. Bility. I think he has legally he has the Liberty Party. I mean, that's what the court said. That's what
right.
The Elections
Commission
legally,
said. But actually, he has piece of it.
Right, but a piece of it, he can grow that piece if
definitely he can grow it. But as it stands, Liberty Party keeps saying, "Hey, we it's like, even if it is not said, it's Bassa Party, right?" And so the Bassa wing of the Liberty Party, in fact, they are telling Musa Bility, go to ACO, go to Al Haji Krumah Party. You don't belong there. You can't even be in Pikana. Yeah. So it's. But Mr. Lobbo, these are your former. They used to call them constituent members of the CPP. The CPP now, I don't know whether you were really in favor or you were like Tai Wongbe, who didn't want it. Like, this was something ill-advised, because the way they wanted to run for the presidency, it's like everybody had an agenda. And what is happening now is, why did we even expect these people to work together in the first place? The fracturing is just too much.
Dennis, let me say a few things on this issue. We've been very clear. The Unity Party, I think we've demonstrated to the Liberian people that indeed we went into the CPP arrangement in good faith. There's nowhere in the world that the largest opposition political party, the party that has a numerical strength, will go into any collaboration with any of these other parties. Look, the CPP accounts for 45.5% of the total votes that were accumulated in the first round. of that 45.5%, Mr. Sherif, the reason when I speak most of the time, if you notice, I use those numbers. Me and numbers make things a lot easier for me.
Right.
And part of that 45.5%.
With all due respect, because I see where you are going, all those numbers irrelevant, right? Because
please let me finish.
You went into a collaboration. You went into a collaboration where you are going to have consensus, primary, VBS. The numbers are irrelevant, but go ahead. Finish.
Let me speak. So, Mr. Sherif, the CPP, the makeup of the CPP, the Liberty Party, UP, ALP, and ANC, accounts for 45.5%. Of that amount, the Unity Party accounts for 28.8% of the total votes. So that means if you took the other three and put them together, they're less than 19%. However, the UP went into that collaboration with open arms and agreed that we all are equal. I think that itself was a demonstration of fair play, fairness, and openness in the interest of moving the country forward. However, Mr. Cummings and the ANC will begin to play dirty in the CPP. We must not ignore the fact that, Mr. Ja, we heard a leaked audio tape, Mr. Sherif, if you can record, where there was discussion about the ANC promising people bikes and the vice president position. When that leaked audio surfaced, one thing the ANC folks have been very good at doing was always denying. You know, I always have this typical African parable that the mother who is always defending her son and denying that her son is involved in small theft. 90% of the time, they can only call them to go see the dead body of their child on the street. And that is what have happened. Your son steals, they say, oh, your son stole. They say, no, my son is very honest, he can't steal. You'll find a body one day on the street. So not only that, Mr. Sherif, Daniel Sando, an executive of the Liberty Party, called on the Spoon platform and informed the Liberian people that Musa Belete went to an executive meeting where he informed the executive that Mr. Cummings had promised them $5 million for them to endorse him. That issue again was vehemently denied because the ANC folks telling the truth is something they are alleged to. However, we will see Mr. Cummings' dealings in the CPP of recruiting from within the CPP. I believe in Musa. I trust Musa's statement, and here's why. Musa Belete would not have gone to Ganta and endorsed Mr. Cummings in a thin air. I know Musa Belete personally. I speak to Musa, and I will tell you this. Here is what bothers me about this whole thing. The fact that Mr. Cummings, knowingly, while he was still in the CPP, and was lying to the Liberian people that he wanted the CPP to hold, but was committing and was giving out positions. That itself was undermining of the very CPP that they talk about. Right. So for me, here's what I would say, Mr. Ja. Okay. I know my ANC friends don't want to discuss this issue, but I will tell you, this saga, this is just the tip of the iceberg, because I know Musa Belete, and I will say this again, like him, hate him. Musa Belete is a very strategic guy in Liberia. Delon and many people in the Liberty Party, when they took the decision to remove Steve Zago and made Belete a chairman, I'm pretty sure there were serious conversations they held. Today, they will be the one to testify. And Mr. Cummings will join Delon at the back of the line to testify. But I'll tell you, Mr. Ja, if you were in the ANC, if Mr. Cummings is not careful, this ends his political career.
Thank you. And you were talking about a proverb. You know, there's also another proverb that says, no matter how the fish and the bird can be in love, but they will never make a home together. Mr. Sherif, is that the case with the CPP, with these guys in the CPP? Like,
no, we left the CPP, so don't call in CPP. We're not there no more. It's them that Cummings and Belete got CPP. We're not. But
it's the same thing we saw with Cummings and Bwaka. They couldn't make a home together, even though they were in love, like the bird and the fish. Now we see the same thing with Musa Belete. So, Mr. Sherif, how many more fracture can we see?
I think that you know, with the LP impending fracture from the ANC, we will see that very soon, because I don't think Mr. Cummings is going to honor the MOU. If there was an MOU,
Right.
I don't think he's going to honor, because he's under tremendous pressure, and there may be other reasons for him not making that decision. So I
So,
think
so
you're
your
going to see that
assumption is that was in the MOU.
What's that?
Your assumption is that was part of the MOU to
It's
make
my
Musa
assumption.
Belete.
Yeah, it's my assumption. I don't have an evidence. The only thing I can rely on is what will encourage, what will motivate, I should say, the Liberty Party to go to Ganta at a convention and endorse Mr. Cummings. There was an expectation of some sort of quid pro quo, and Mr. Cummings has not, honor his end of the bargain, because I don't think he has any real power within the ANC to be able to make the decision. I don't think he has real power. So we're going to see that. We're also going to see in the near future. I don't trust that the ALP is a solid ally. Something just not right to me about the ALP. So you may see a fracture there as well.
Let me ask something here real quick. In terms of the ALP with the Unity Party, we'll wait to see what will happen. We will not predict that, but however, we know Mr. Ure have said it. He support us, so we'll take it. But let me say this to you, Mr. Jab. On the issue of what was in the MOU, I would say this, Mr. Jab. In politics, Mr. Cummings have built a reputation of hosting press conference like the CDC. 20 million get disbursed, CDC whole press conference. The youth wing, the government, everybody. Mr. Cummings walk out of a meeting, he holds a press conference. So this is normal. So I don't know where a major allegation of such will be out there lingering in the public, and the ANC will not respond. This thing is simple. I think Mr. Cummings owed it to the Liberian people to come forward and look in the cameras and tell the Liberians that I made no commitment to Musa Belete and the Liberty Party, that the information is not true. There was no MOU. So until Mr. Cummings can do it, we have to respect the man who mustered the courage to come forward and say we had a MOU, and that's Musa Belete. So let the ANC challenge themselves and come forward and prove Musa wrong. So we can't be questioning how sure there's some agreement. No, that's up to Mr. Cummings now to prove us wrong.
And when was the last time Mr. Bwaka came out with a press conference to prove people wrong of all the things?
Mr. Bwaka just had a press conference today. He spoke on the issue of rape. Yesterday, he had an interview with D4. So if you want me to continue, he's had interviews. He addressed issues both with the BBC, Al Jazeera. You want me? I can go on and on.
All right, no, don't go on.
There are press releases I can share with you and your audience, Mr. Ja. Ambassador Bwaka is not on trial here, so I'm not here to defend him.
What I mean, because these things seem to be how our political parties operate, right? We don't. No,
that's not true. Every time something was said against the UP, we responded.
When the CPP was falling apart, it took Mr. Bwaka like 6 months before we could even hear anything from him. But that's not the point tonight. You were talking about the ALP because I said the fish and the burrow may be in love, but they can make a home. Do you really believe that the ALP and this marriage with the UP is going to last? How long?
Absolutely.
And how soon do we see some? Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely, and here's why.
And before you go to that reason, I know you're not going to speak much of Mr. Cummings, but what is going on? Because I think Mr. Cummings is going into these alliances and things are falling off. The first one was the CPP that some of his party members, including Tai Wongwe, advised him not to, right? Mr. Cummings did not endorse a candidate in the runoff of 2017 because he didn't want to. He didn't see any of them as someone he could endorse. And then he flipped and was part of the CPP against the will and the wishes of some of his partisans. Now he was in a marriage. It was in the marriage with Musa Belete. Before Musa Belete could say split from the Yombli faction, we also heard that it was Yombli and the DeLong wing that actually, and also without precondition or with some motive, because according to what we heard, they wanted Yombli to be the VP. And so since that was not forthcoming, Mr. JNB was able to use that and say, come, I'm going to make you a VP. That's what we heard. You can tell me if this is wrong. So what Cummings is doing with Belete is the same thing that JNB is doing with Yombli Kanga. What's the difference here?
So again, you said we were treated as speculations. I do not comment on speculations. As far as I'm
concerned, make a press conference to clarify?
Let me finish.
No, what I'm saying, can he come out with a press conference to clarify this?
Mr. Ja, if Yombli comes out and say there exists an agreement between she and Ambassador Bouaka promising her the vice presidential position, he will be under all obligation to come out and clarify. Until that happens, he's under no obligation, because as far as I'm concerned, we recognize her as the political leader, and that is how we've been working with her. Having said that, Yombli is a senator. Any Liberian can be picked as a running mate. So again, anything is possible. We are in a political process. Having said that, I want to come back to Mr. Cummings. Look, Mr. Ja, what Mr. Cummings have demonstrated, any rational Liberian who was sitting on the fence and was looking at Cummings will now have a second thought to question Mr. Cummings' ability to make rational decisions. This is not the first time. We can list several of them, from his handling of the CPP as chairman, from him allowing Aloysius Tuhu to go out there and read that ridiculous press statement, now from the type of alignments he has made in the past. Look, Mr. Ja, the ANC people should not be pretending. They've told us that they don't trust Mr. Cummings' judgment. This is why the ANC people, they're suffering themselves. Let me tell you something. You recall when they were selling Mr. Cummings as this great decision maker. When Mr. Cummings made a decision to go along and say he would support non-Kidor in the primary in Nima County, what happened to the ANC? All of them were on Facebook and saying, we stand with Tar. What does that mean? That means Mr. Cummings has poor judgment. Tar judgment is right. So, Dennis, that means they were telling us that the guy just can't make good judgment. He just don't have that ability.
If you disagree with someone, if you're making an assumption,
that's what they said.
It doesn't mean that judgment is
no, Mr. Ja. If they said he made a decision call and they came out and said they do not believe in his judgment, they stand with Tar. It means
let me check you on that.
Ja, you are not, Mr. Ja.
If you are not a political leader,
I'm struggling to understand your position here.
Yeah, I mean, you're free to struggle.
Okay, let me say what I want to say.
Yeah, because you are saying
I
disagree with the political leader. They are saying they don't trust their judgment.
Let me read. Mr. Sherif, I think you need to moderate this show. I think Dennis Ja, because he's from Atlanta, I think his Georgia solidarity for Mr. Cummings is kicking in. And I would love to see that. Are you here to defend Mr. Cummings? If not, then let me speak. I'm
here to tell you.
Okay, so let me be free to speak.
No, you are making an assumption. No, you are saying, because what we are saying here is almost every partisan will just fall in line with our question.
You just spoke about Joseph Bouaka. I didn't question you, though.
Excuse me?
You spoke about Bouaka. You insinuated. You speculated. I didn't question you. So allow me to speak. Let me finish my point.
But I can bring you to I can call you to a
absolutely
point when you are making a leap. So I was just recognizing that you are assuming that because they disagree with him, they are saying he has poor judgment.
That's what they said. It's not me. They said.
I never heard that, but go ahead.
Okay. Again, I will restate for the Liberian people. Our audience will be the judge. When Mr. Cummings made a decision that he was going to support Ide Gonglo in Nima County, over 80% of his ANC base here in America, they all took to social media saying they stand with Tab. It's simple. It means, Cummings, your decision you made was wrong, so we support Tab. However, Mr. Jai, on the issue of ability, I will say this to you. Mr. Cummings will need to come clean to the Liberian people, because he made a commitment, according to Mr. Ability, until it is denied by the ANC. I take Mr. Ability's word, because it's been over 3 days since Ability spoke on Spoon. There have been no press statement from the ANC. In politics, it's very, very clear. The fact that the ANC is yet to release any statement, the ANC release statement every other hour, so they refer to that as a press conference party. That itself speaks volume. But I will say this to you, Mr. Jai. The CPP, or whatever it is, with Musa Ability and that of the ANC, Mr. Cummings is under immense pressure. And the reason why I say this is that I think Mr. Cummings put himself in a very tough spot. When you appear to be desperate, you make a lot of decisions that will hurt you down the road. And I strongly believe this particular one is going to really win out Mr. Cummings.
Thank you. And Mr. Sherif, that is Mr. Lobbo Unity Party side that is kicking in, even though he's accusing me of being an ANC. Mr. Sherif, what does this say about Mr. Cummings when it comes to his judgment? Because with these alliances and the breaking apart, the first one was with Mr. Bouaka. There are just two persons in the CPP wanting to be president, yet they couldn't agree, and now they are falling apart. It was first with DeLong and Yombly. All of them were kumbaya. It fell apart. He was left with Peace of the Liberty Party, that is Musa Ability. Now Musa is likely to endorse the ANC. What does this say about Mr. Cummings? Is it just they don't like him, or is he going into these agreements blindfolded, and that's why he's getting the buy hand of it?
I apologize. I have some noise in the background, so if you hear any noise, it will be, my studio is kind of noisy today.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think it is troubling for me to see what's going on with Mr. Cummings. Mr. Cummings, that is an indication of, when I mentioned earlier, when you call yourself a political leader, it's not just you standing out there wanting to be a standard bearer, right? So the Liberian people should judge you for what you're doing now. So yes, there's a breakup. There was a breakup with his previous collaboration with JNB. There you can argue there was a kind of breakup now because of Mr. Cummins's influence. There was a breakup within the Liberty Party. So now the Liberty Party is fractured, and there is soon to be a breakup within the collaboration with Musa Ability and Cummings. So that says a lot about the person he is. So Mr. Cummings continues to say, we can't do the same thing over and over and expect a different result. But same thing you are doing. You don't have, you're not demonstrating that leadership quality. Again, as a leader, right? There are times that you will make a decision that's unpopular. Don't watch the polls. There are times that your decision that you take might even hurt you in the short run, right? But do it because it is the right thing to do. If you felt that it is the right thing to do to select Musa Ability as a standard bearer, it will be it's not going to be an overwhelmingly popular decision. But if you felt that this is the right thing to do, then do it anyway. I think it will be the right thing to do because of the fact that this is someone who has gone all out for him. This is someone who has fought for him. So to now stall on that promise, right? It's something that is going to affect Mr. Cummings. Well, one thing, Dennis, is that what I hear from most people in Liberia that are familiar with Cummings, they really say that he's not a factor. So he's not a factor. So whether or not he picks Musa or any other candidate, a vice presidential candidate, This not going to matter. You know, the top tier candidates that we're looking at right now, George Weah, JNB, you know, in that order. So he is not really at this time a major factor in the election. So it's really not going to matter. And so what's going to happen is all of these fractures is further going to erode his chances of even polling within 10% of the popular vote when it's all said and done.
Thank you. Let's go to our last issue for the night, which is a 15-year tax break for minor manufacturing company. And Mr. Lobbo will come back when we bring in the guests to all these things. We read in the papers that members of the House of Representatives have granted 15-year tax break to a company which is expected to construct, develop, and operate a vegetable oil refinery in the country. We know of these tax breaks, right? This one, it will further, according to the report, narrow the country's tax base, which has been continuously eroded by multiple tax concessions. What is this thing with our? I was talking to Dr. And was talking about one of these shows, talking about how this whole idea of these tax breaks, tax exemptions, and duty free, and all these things, these were done like, and Mr. Sherif, you would know this thing, as far back as over 100 years ago, when Liberia was doing these things to incentivize people coming to the country with, and still these things are on the books, and our government continue to give these huge tax breaks. If I were sending books to my school in Dudwiken, I will pay taxes, and but if metal steel, whatever they want to bring in, including their family belongings, that's tax-free. So we continue to do this, and it comes from the legislature. When you read these things, or Mr. Lobbo, let me start with you as someone who look at these numbers and these tax incentives. I know you read this story. What came to your mind as to what is it that we are getting when we give these tax waivers to these concession companies?
I don't want to be hypocritical because I like to be factual. Yeah. Everywhere around the world, tax incentives or tax breaks are given to potential investors. Yeah. Now, it is a calculation that the government is making that if we give you 15 years tax incentives and you were to come to Liberia, let's say we're going to be able to generate $200,000 from you in taxes over a period of time. But if you are going to come and create jobs for us in the country where you hire our people, because by hiring our people, that create employment opportunity, that also expand the revenue base, that expands social development and things like that. The government is betting that based on the number of people you will hire, based on the length of the concession, that we'll be able to recoup our loss and still make profit. That is one of the fundamental arguments. Because the issue of tax incentive, Dennis, when you look at fiscal policy, it says it's the government spending and taxation that influence the economy. So it's not a bad thing. The problem I do have with these type of tax incentives being given out is the arrangement under which they've been given out and how those arrangements will be implemented. For example, Mr. Ja, if we give a company tax incentives and the company tells us that they're going to operate in Liberia for 15 years, but they're expected to create, let's say, 10,000 jobs, and that company comes to Liberia, do all their operation in 7 years, and create less than 4,000 jobs, and pack up and leave in year 10. We are at a loss. Now, the sad part about it is that every single member of the legislature today, one of their fundamental arguments against the Unity Party government, Mr. Sherif, if you recalled, was that the UP government was known for signing bogus concession agreements, that we gave tax incentives to companies that left. Now, what I want to see is how different was this structure from the previous concession agreements. Because if it is going to be the same model, then that means you did nothing different. So, Mr. Ja, while it is true, I'm skeptical about it. I would like to see the fine prints. I would like to see the details as to how many jobs the company will be creating. What is the social corporate responsibility component of that agreement? What will be some of those different things? What are the incentives to the communities? So how does that improve the economy? How many jobs will be created? So for right now, it is a good thing, but I'm very, very much skeptical until I read all the full details about this agreement.
But just for 1 minute, what is the history of the government giving these tax breaks and we are getting something out of it? What's the history of our government doing that?
To be honest with you, Mr. Jai, I will tell you it's been pathetic. It's terrible. Even my own Unity Party government, I will be very clear on the record. I think, for example, look at the Farmington. The Farmington got more than 10-year tax incentives. I stopped at that hotel. That hotel don't even look like it's up to 30% capacity. So technically, what are we getting? How many jobs being created by the Farmington? Let's look at the RAJ resort that was built by Bob Johnson. He was giving huge tax incentives. Madam Sherif was so pressed for foreign direct investment because she could not borrow money, which I will understand from a government perspective. You need money, given what she inherited. So she wanted this foreign direct investment. So she kept on going for these concession agreements. So as a means to keep her government at float until she was able to borrow. But under these circumstances now, Mr. Jha, where the government does have some type of revenue base, I think this government is in the best position not to be rushing into some of these agreements, to be able to go through a whole public hearings. And let's structure it in a way that, Mr. Jha, we say, listen, for you to be able to benefit this much, you must create this amount of job in year one. Look at all the agreement we signed with ArcelorMittal before. ArcelorMittal did not come through on any of its commitment. No. But yet then recently, they've been giving the government is trying to push through another extension for them. So technically, if we did it was bad, how do you continue on it?
Mr. Sherif, let's go into our history of these kind of things happening. Recently, it was determined that 66 out of the 68 concession agreements signed by the Unity Party were bogus. And now we see these things happening over and over. Quite recently, I hosted Madam Ide Gonglo Ware and Mr. Depu talking about the Metal Steel deal. And it probably passed because they didn't honor what they promised before, and we still keep giving them these breaks, we keep giving them these incentives, and on we go. What's your take?
I think George did a very good job of enumerating some of the past contracts, where companies got these tax breaks. And one of the things that we even forgot is, don't forget that part. Our members of the legislature, right? They have duty-free privileges.
Yep.
Which is absolutely unacceptable. So they can import whatever. And so already our taxpayers' dollars is purchasing vehicles, brand new vehicles for these guys, and gassing their vehicles. Some of them live in free housing. They don't pay. Some of them don't pay electric bills. They don't pay telephone bills because they got call cars or whatever.
Scratch cards.
So what is it called now?
Scratch cards.
Scratch cards. So like whatever. So these guys are, again, they are fleecing the country. But going just to directly answer your question, you have to look at, I can't now look at this period. I got to go back to, this Firestone Agreement in 1926 under Charles D.B. King. Dennis, that was, to me, that's the basis for everything that we're seeing now. So for 99 years, Firestone signed a 99-year concession agreement. The government of Liberia signed a 99-year concession agreement with Firestone for 1 million hectares, 1 million acres, right? At 6 cents per hectare. And this is, so the Liberian nation state was fleeced. And so what you had years after that is all of these breaks. It doesn't matter which administration it was. All of these breaks for companies that are already, that can already take care of themselves. So what you're doing, as George mentioned, you have to look at the number, right? is this beneficial for the Liberian people? You know, so you're not signing another blank check to these companies. What is the benefit to the Liberian people? How is it going to alleviate unemployment? How many, right, jobs that this is going to create? How much job this is going to create? So all of these cost benefit analysis have to go into the decision making process, and I don't think that's done. So you have, you know, these issues with Firestone, you know, ArcelorMittal. You have, you know, issues with other companies around the country. I mean, these are the top ones that we know about, but there are other companies that are also getting tax breaks. And so, you know, I mentioned that Liberia is not poor. So how is it that you're giving all of these tax breaks to these companies, and then you turn around, the companies don't do what they're supposed to do? First of all, there's no enforcement mechanism. Nobody's going to go back and follow up to see if what the company said they were going to do has been done in 5 years, in 10 years. Then nobody is going to go back to check on anything. This particular company has been around for a while. This company has been around since the 1960s. So this is not a new company. They're just going into different sectors, but they've been around since the 1960s. It's owned by, some Lebanese merchants. And so they know what to do, right? Here's another thing that we also haven't discussed, is that most of these companies are, what they do is that in order to get some of these, deals, they bribe our legislatures. They take bribes from them. So you cannot have a serious economic policy if all of these things are going on. And so I long for a day that there will be capable legislatures who will really investigate, real cost benefit analysis, some policies that is friendly, not to the big businesses, but to the average Liberians. And I don't think that's happening right now.
Thank you, Mr. Sherif. We will take a short break.
Dennis, before we go, real quick, 1 second. Mr. Sherif, on that point you ended on. For example, ArcelorMittal was supposed to be giving certain amount of money to the University Geology Department. The last time I checked, it is yet to happen. Never happened. ArcelorMittal did not come through on any of its social corporate responsibility. But yet then, I continue to say to the Liberian people, the people you send to represent you to Capitol Building matters. You send lawmakers to Capitol Building that ask the finance minister to speak English to their level. Think about it. Senators are asking the Minister of Finance. He said, please speak to our level. Wilson Tapper is insulting their intelligence and saying, maybe I have to speak the English that you can understand. What English do you speak? You don't speak serious. So again, the people we are sending, how many lawmakers can read through a concession agreement? Can you imagine our Liberian legislature approved the Eton and Iboma loan that would have tied the country to a $1 billion loan with an equity company that has no history or assets anywhere? The people they approved the agreement when the Minister of Finance held a press conference and said the deal was still being ratified. I thought it is the Liberian legislature that should ratify and finalize an agreement. Yeah. That is the tragedy about our lawmakers. So, my brother, until we get rid of these guys, we are heading nowhere right now.
Yeah, and Dennis, real quick, just to add up to that, the people real quick. Yeah. The people are laughing at us. So it's embarrassing for me, and I'm sure it's embarrassing for you. It's embarrassing for George that these people come into our country and they laugh at us. They say, look at these people. They don't know anything. And they fleece us. And they bribe our officials. And this is a tragedy of the Liberian story.
We'll take a short break. When we come back, we're going to get some comments. If possible, get calls.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Jah.
Welcome back to Tough Talking Thursday on Focus on Liberia. My guest, Mr. Mohamed Sherif, he's FOL political analyst, and Mr. George Lobbo of The Drive. He is member of Team GNB. We don't have Mr. Cooney tonight because Mr. Cooney is celebrating his 28th wedding anniversary. And you see Mr. Cooney there. He's our chief political analyst. So all of us say, Mr. Cooney, happy anniversary. Let's go to our comments quickly. And if you want to join the conversation, the number is in the ticker. Please call and be a part of the discussion. Melissa Yadolo, Air France was in Liberia during Ellen and her Unity Party administration and left Liberia. We have brought it back. Yadolo also said, what about Delta Airlines that left Liberia during Ellen and her Unity Party? So this is not happening. And Yadolo continue, how many airports Liberia has? So George, answer that before we move on.
So Dennis, I think it is good when people speak that we put it in its proper context. What did Delta leave Liberia? Mr. Sherif, I told you that when the UP came to power, we inherited Liberia with massive infrastructure deficit. Delta originally wanted to resurface the runway. They were going to construct that terminal, but then they were going to be in charge for a certain period of time. The Unity Party government didn't see it as a better deal for us. So we said we will do it ourselves. And so Delta said the runway had problem, so they left. They didn't leave because of poor services that were being rendered. The airport, yes, the runway was bad, and that is why they left. So the Unity Party government made it a priority. We went to the Bank of China and took a $60 million loan. The good thing about it, we didn't take a loan to buy Land Cruisers, to buy Gucci belts for our city mayors and our officials. We instead reconstructed the runway and we built the terminal, which met international standard, for which now you could have gone back now to Air France and say, oh, the runway is now intact. We have electricity that is stable because the Unity Party left an 88 megawatt dam that is functioning fully with another 34 megawatt power station on Bourgeois Island that was functioning. It is your inability to manage what you inherited from us. Look at the ministerial complex, how dirty it has become. So when you speak, sir, let's speak about the facts. Why did they leave?
Thank you.
Now they are leaving because you can't manage the airport properly. It's not because of that.
Jimmy Isma said, did Sherif say it is not hard to run a government? This is an example of this 6 blind men describing an elephant.
Yeah, I like to respond to Jimmy.
Go ahead, sir.
So again, when we speak on issues, people who support the administration, they come up, and I know they have to fight hard. They have to fight hard for the people whose pockets they're in. Yes, I did say it is not hard to run a government. It is not hard. For God's sake, we have George Weah is elected president and he doesn't know anything about government. It is not hard. So all it is that you need to do as the leader, and I'm going to start with the president of the Republic of Liberia, any president, not just George Weah, you want to make sure that you have a cabinet that is functional, not dysfunctional. How many times have we seen a cabinet reshuffle and all of the dysfunction that's going on? There has never been a cabinet reshuffle. In everything that's going on, this president has forgotten sometimes that he has a nation to run. And therefore, he has a lot of time on his hands, you know, to sing music, to produce music. He has a lot of time on his hand to play volleyball and soccer every time, every day of the week. Listen, so if I'm president of the Republic of Liberia, one of the things that I would promise the Liberian people is that, one, and you just have to be specific, one, no more borrowing, right? We're not going to borrow anymore. No more debt. Okay, that's number one. You're going to have hospitals that work. Everybody in government, right? From the government officials to the average citizens, we will all have some kind of insurance, which means we have good hospitals, and those hospitals will be functional. And every single Liberian will have an insurance so that when they get sick, they're not buying their own latest gloves to go to the hospital. They're not going to be buying their bed when they have to go see their emergency room physician. So
thank you.
their medical insurance will already take care of those things. So we start from there, and then we'll go to agriculture,
Mr. Sherif,
rural road developments, and all of that. It is really, really easy to run a government, to run the government of the Republic of Liberia. The job I do here in the United States is more difficult than being a president of the Republic of Liberia. Yes, I said that.
Thank you. Williet Dunbar says, hello, panelists and host Mr. Ja. Williet Dunbar is watching and following from frigid but beautiful Minneapolis. Elvis Murray, where was Unity Party generating money from to maintain the infrastructure that they left for CDC? Should CDC also borrow money as well to maintain those infrastructure? This one is from...
You want me to answer that question?
No. Chris Masale, why some of you make excuses for every failure of this government? Do you people really care about this country doing better? Or just an individual like Judge Weah should do better? Few more comments here and we'll go to the phone line. Here. Chris, again, continue. Or Crisco Masale, this government came to power to do better than the previous administration and not to do the worst. That's why the people go to election to bring in a new government. They can come in now and continue shifting blame to the past government. Stephen Keita, George is not just talking, but he's making sense in his talk. That is George Lobbo. Florence Kinsley, Mr. Sherif, I'm surprised that you are talking about old regime. Does this mean that we should continue doing this kind of bad corruption in this day and age? You are saying that there should not be any changes. Come on now. And you got a response there.
I think she didn't understand. So let me repeat again. So
someone responded.
You have to put things in their historical context. I have a deep appreciation for history. So whatever happens, I have to put it in some historical context. So history is very important to me, and I'm sure it's important for a lot of Liberians.
Stephen Johnson said, borrowing is not a bad thing altogether. It becomes bad when what is borrowed is used to fund liabilities rather than assets. If they are used to fund assets, they are able to pay for themselves and create profit. Frederick Zebe said, George enjoying himself today. Yeah, that's why George come to focus on Liberia to enjoy. All right, let's go to our phone line here. There are still more comments. What is going on here is that Mr. Comey is not going to select ability for VP, period. Let's get to the phone line. The first one here is from Elvis. Elvis, you are live. Your question or comment?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. John. Thanks to George and Mr. Sherif. It's been a good discussion tonight. Quickly, I just want to touch on a few points before I get off the line. With the thing that everybody always said, oh, Liberia is a rich country, I always go to the contrary to that statement. If you're a rich person and you don't know how to manage your money, like the Bible says, a fool and his money the fool will be quickly separated from his money. And I think our country is not a rich country because we so-called have the resources, but yet we're looking for. So the reality is that we are a poor country. Let's just get that notion out here. And then secondly, to Mr. Cummings, I think, like George said, he's made a lot of poor judgments, and it's something that is very discouraging to me personally because I supported him in the beginning. And I think looking at the decision that he's made so far with his elections and people he associates himself with, it says a lot about what a potential presidency for him could look like with the people that he surrounds himself with. So I just want to make those 2 points. Thank you again, Mr. John, for taking my call.
Thank you so much. Let's go to Kemu. Kemu, you're live.
Yeah, I'm GS Kemu, calling from Maryland. Well, Mr. John, this is why I always enjoy this show. Mr. Lobbo today, if I never agree with him today, I give him my hand. I give him my hand. He's doing well, and he has said everything. In fact, the 2 panelists have said everything. But my thing here is that one word I took from Lobbo is that Comey is acting out of desperation. For people who have privilege to the MOU, it's not only the vice president position, but Musa is manning finance ministry, LPRC, National Port Authority, and the vice presidency. So anytime person in ANC will agree for them to give that to the Liberty Party, that's where the MOU been stuck. So those who are privileged to it, that's what they're saying. But it's going to come out and you're going to know. Thank you for the show. As I will follow you. Today, your panelists are doing well. I thank them and I take my hat off for Lobbo. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jimmy Ismail said, Josh, was Bwaka not promising Jumbly VP position, politics, and politics? And talking about Bwaka and Jumbly, we remember this photo, the number 5 and the number 6. And so the same thing continued to happen, right?
But
so,
Dennis, let's put it in context. That was the CPB chairman and the CPB leader, so.
Yeah.
So it was not vice president. Mr. Sherif, you hear that, right? That was the CPB leadership in Bikera.
Let me bring in Mr. Kasali Lobbo.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dennis, and thanks to George and Sherif. They are doing plenty tonight. I would just love to touch on this Liberia debt portfolio.
Okay.
That is where my heartstring is right now. It is so shameful sometimes when you listen to the Minister of Finance saying some of these things. He sounds sometimes like he did not go to school, or maybe he thinks he's living in the world that no one knows how to read and write. This is a man who will present a document to the Senate to have them approve of it. And then after they try to question the document, then he come out and say the document he sent is not authentic. When in the world you will send a document to the Senate to have them approve of it, and then you come out and say it's not authentic. And in that very same document, the Ministry of Finance name is there as a director. So is he telling me that he did not authenticate his own ministry before putting his ministry's name forward to collect debt from the government of Liberia or from the Liberian people? Then we'll go back to the $72 million that was paid last year. Was that also not authentic that he allowed the Liberian people to pay that money? Or because the Senate did not do their job?
Thank you.
I mean, it's true that his guy will just keep stealing from the poor people and think it's cool, not like them. The government is just a disgrace and they are criminal and a lot of people later.
Thank you, Kasali. And anytime there is Kasali, there is always Aliyu Kamara. Aliyu, you're alive.
Yeah, you know, Kasali and Aliyu and Kamara, they always come from almost the same portion of Lobbo country, so that's why you see they come back to back.
Okay.
You know?
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, a couple couple of things. I hope one of these days you hurry up, Dennis, and try to take Sherif back to Sino, because look like Sherif losing a lot of things. You got to get him back to how you put out and you go spend some time.
The man from River G.
We get rid of some of that seaweed, too much Sherif more than that. But yeah,
you said Sino. You want to send Dennis back to Sino, right?
Couple of things, man.
Oh, go ahead, Leo. Time is fast spent.
Yeah, but I guess everyone hold me. And you don't know me. I will talk. So, a couple of things. When people come up and say, oh, Ellie, Unity Party, and I'm Unity Party, man, and I will never join Unity as a party, as a producer blocker. But anybody who want to compare Joe Weir to Unity Party, that person either is dishonest or the person doesn't understand what's going on. Then if you go to Liberia today, any change that you see in Liberia has been made since the Civil War. Since the Civil War ended in 2003, it is Ellen Johnson Mark that is in Liberia. I went to beginning to buy fish. It took me less than 45 minutes. That Ellen Johnson Mark. My grandpa had 250 acres behind Boma Mountain. I left from Morovia. I reached to Boma every before 2 o'clock. Yeah. Ellen Johnson Mark. Okay? When you go to Monrovia, even the things that George Weir is taking something, but the one they call it the Somalia Drive, the one they call it Japan Freeway, Ellen Johnson Sally had already orchestrated that it was just left to be finished. Anything you see tangible in Monrovia now, as we speak, that Ellen Johnson Sally. If somebody build an airport, and we all go through that terminal, the terminal is small, but it is of international standard. It's already there. Everything, the escalator, Ellen Johnson carry escalator like bro, at the airport. You can't meet it, you not continue from there, then you say, oh, Ellen, this kind of silly, unnecessary argument, but let me just say it.
Yeah, please conclude.
I want you to understand. Yeah, any development you see Joe Weir talking about are less than 1 mile. You see any road in Morelos they're talking about are less than 1 mile, the one that Joe Weir did. And all the one that he built, already started cracking. Let me just touch on the Musa Birthday thing. I have a bit simplicity because I believe there's wisdom and simplicity. The Musa Birthday thing, let me just say this. The thing, I don't know why people making it like so that news. Musa Birthday is the one now, you know what they can say, Kama is or something, I don't want to call what Kama is. He fought hard, he destroyed Youngly, he embarrassed all the other people because he wanted to have a convention that he will pay people, they will be able to go there and vote to support Comey. He got rid of the people who are opposing. Now he supported Comey people that say they made a road, get there. And he in the middle, and he forcing Comey, and he harassing Comey now, he's threatening Comey now, but not working out for him. So whatever day he made, at the same day he lying. So let me just close with this. I thank you guys for the show ever so much, but the realities are there. My mother brought me to America. She not put money in my pocket. My mother not sent me to school. She did in America. She brought me to America. I found my own way to college. I found my own way to get money in my pocket. My mother gave me the foundation. Ellie gave Joe Weir the foundation. You don't understand where Ellie gave her. Ellie gave with a less than $80 million budget. Okay, she can't make that.
Thank you, Ellie.
For Ross system, she took it from $80 million to $500 million. That's too simple to understand. Everything I want to know both sides. It is simple. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Ali. Let's get our last caller for the night, Mr. Paul.
Yes, sir. I really appreciate you taking my call. So my very first question I have for you, the host, did you invite any members of ANC on the show tonight, sir? Just a quick question.
No.
Okay, so I think that was a little bit of a disservice. But anyways, let me go into the whole, Musa Belli and Mr. Comey's, situation. This thing is simple, as a nation, we have a long way to go because people can just go and listen to information for anyone just wrong with it. We don't know what's in the MOU or whatsoever. But even if Musa Belli is requesting different ministries or whatsoever, the question is, because again, the whole CPA framework document clause is that whoever becomes a nominee can select somebody from the opposite party. Okay? So Mr. Comey promised the Liberal Party, the vice presidency. He did not say Mr. Benty. He said, I agree that Liberal Party would get the vice presidency the same way Mr. Michael was promising the vice presidency for Youngby. What is wrong with that? But anyways, let's move on. Now, the MOU, when was the MOU drawn up? Nobody knows. So again, when you go somewhere say, oh, I agree to this, somebody, the MOU came after the fact. After the fact, the MOU came out. So when Mr. Baker went through, I saw MOU, that's when Mr. Comey rejected. I can't do this. So, I believe what he did was honorable. Because, people are running around talking about he's desperate and this and that. He didn't say no MOU with disability. He said, I promised the LP, the vice president, and that means the LP will have to submit a list of different candidates. And from there, it will be a vetting process. But, Mr. Comey's trying to say in the country that is, it is what it is. So you have to battle through this. But it's a systematic individual that is doing his best to do the right thing within a country that is so corrupt. Now,
Thank you.
The UP government, the UP government was the worst government ever in the history of Liberia because they received the most money ever in the history of Liberia. That's number one. And number two, everything is considered more educated in Joshua. So she was supposed to do more than Joshua. Okay? So somebody should be running around talking about Joshua did this. Joshua is incompetent. We don't know. But Joshua is more competent. And she did worse. The success of a country is not based in infrastructure. It's based in the development of the human capital. And once you leave, how many white people like brother facing that? So never start out saying, I don't support Joshua. I can't stand down there. If you choose to believe the angel of the devil, we know the devil is capable of. But this is the angel, and she did worse than the devil. So
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, man, thank you.
Thank you. And just to let you know, it's very difficult to get someone from the ANC. I'd normally go through the chairman, but it's difficult. So if you can represent the ANC, please be my guest, or if you can get anyone. But in response to your question, somebody who think they know me say, but ANC is already being represented by Mr. Ja. So sometimes, all right. So thank you very much. Quickly. You too.
Dennis.
I will take 1 minute each to respond to our callers.
Please, let me just respond sentence fresh. Dennis, this is the tragedy about the Liberian society. When intellectuals, intelligent folks call, and with so much confidence, spewing out lies, misinformation. That is my concern about the country's future. Like the caller just left. To sit and say the Unity Party received more money than any government. My brother, I think you didn't listen to Mr. Sherif and myself. I will help you again. Liberia's total international debt, both domestic and international, prior to 1980 was under 700 million. By the time the PRC government and President Doe left power, they extended the debt by more than $1.5 billion. So I don't know how you do math, but a government that extended the debt by $1.5 billion and a government that borrowed under 900 million, Mr. Sherry, who got more money?
He's talking about external
aid. But then, Dennis, give me the chance. Let me provide the education.
No, but why you said you are talking about debt? He's not talking about
debt. I know where he's coming from. Let me provide the education. Don't worry, Mr. Jah. I have committed myself to doing that for them. And here's why. You see, Mr. Jah, this is why when I say when people read, comprehension is going to be our next national West disaster in Liberia.
Mr. Lobbo, go to your point about receiving the most aid.
Mr. Jah, when people speak of money that went to Liberia during the UP government, aid money, people need to understand the United Nations mission in Liberia, UNMIL, their total money spent in Liberia will always be counted towards the aid money we receive. That money was never given to government. And again, I will say this: whatever you say spent in Liberia over the course of 12 years, that money will never be accounted for by the government. It will count towards the aid money. It is true, during the 12 years of the Unity Party, you had UNMIL in the country. UNMIL told you they spent 500 million on peacekeeping. Is it the UP government that accounts for it? Is it the UP that accounts for how much UC spent? Is it the Unity Party that accounts for what GTZ spent in Liberia? We need to understand these things. So making these type of blanket statements is deceptive, Mr. Jah. And I think there's a need that we provide this education for our folks. People can't continue to spew out gibberish and misinform the public. So just so he understands it. Aid money, the money goes to implementing partners in the country. We do not account for those type of money. The money you hold government responsible for, direct assistance, like the 500 million that was given to President Doe by the U.S. government. Name one government that gave the UP government 500 million direct assistance. Then we can talk about it. So the next time when people make this statement, ask them to source the funding. So I will leave it right there for him. Let him go and read better.
Right. You still didn't, but is there any other government that got more money than the Ellen Johnson?
Yes, I would say again, the PRC government, Dennis Jah.
That was military aid.
No.
That was military aid.
It was money given to government.
That is not true. But
no. Hold on, Mr. Sherif. Dennis Jah, I would challenge you and pull the YouTube. The U.S. Assistant Secretary of State, he said the People's Redemption Council government was so corrupt until America was embarrassed with President Doe's government corruption.
No, that's not my point. No, that's not my point. I'm talking about more money being received.
Yes, Doe received 500 million direct assistance from the U.S. government. The Samuel Doe government.
Mr. Sherif, go ahead. Let's go.
Any day.
Respond to the comments and the colors.
Yeah, so one of the things, and we're going to continue to hear this, from now to election day and beyond, because this is our politics. Our politics is we have divergent views, and that is healthy for our democracy. But what I will like to say in this regard, with regards to debt, is that it would seem from the numbers that we produce that the PRC really accumulated more debt, and the PRC was not even committed to really any kind of fiscal responsibility, thus creating a sort of tension with the United States government, where the 17 experts had to quickly leave. They were there on a 2-year contract. I don't think they were there for quite a month, and so they had to leave. So I'm not sure how much. I haven't really looked into that extensively. How much Mrs. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf got. She certainly got a lot of goodwill in terms of debt write-off. So Liberia should have had a clean slate after the Sirleaf era. But I think towards the end of her administration, there was an accumulation of debt also, which she blamed on Ebola. So you can make the argument, why weren't we prepared for Ebola? And then George Weah is picking right up from where Ellen left off. And George Weah, 4 years into his presidency, now the debt is $1.7 billion. So at the pace at which he is going in the next 2 years, we may hit $2 billion. So that is something very concerning. And as I mentioned earlier, debt is an existential threat to the national development of Liberia, because generations yet unborn will be saddled with these debt. You don't take a debt to buy government vehicles. There's no need for a government vehicle. Okay, that's one of the things. If I'm president, nobody's getting a government vehicle. If I'm president, government will be disincentivized. Public service, you're not getting a vehicle from government. You're not getting gas station. You're not getting scratch cars and all this nonsense. It's unacceptable what is going on. So when we begin to do those things, then we will show enough seriousness about our country. Right now, as it stands, people are not serious. Okay. And it's not really that hard to run a country. It is not that hard. A country as small as Liberia, it's not hard.
Thank you. And George, I don't have the numbers before me, but we can go to that. From what I've read so far, the Ellen Sirleaf government got more money than the Doe government, which most of the money that Doe got was for military aid, and that's the one that's being recorded.
So the money the UP got was what about aid? Aid is aid. That is the same aid we got, right?
No, I want us to make that distinction. So, but
Mr. Ja, I will take you up on this. Here's what I will take you up on. I want you to do a research and come back on it.
You can do the research too and bring the numbers.
I don't need to because I'm prepared on that, and I will say this to you.
So what are the numbers?
I say again, Mr. Ja, let me be very clear with you. A government, Mr. Sherif, that was not allowed to borrow until late 2010 June, when she made the HIPIC initiative. Think about it. Let's look at usage spending. What I'm trying to get us to understand that doing a unity project.
I just want the numbers. No. You what you are explaining is not relevant to what we're saying here.
Mr. Ja, I cannot account for how much usage spent because that money, the government does not account for usage spending. What happened is, for example, 25 million was given to Liberia during the Ellen time for Ebola. You remember? What did the U.S. government do? And they sent U.S. troops to Liberia. Who accounts for that money? That is aid money we received. 25 million was given for the restructuring of the armed forces of Liberia. Who account for it? America sent SSRO, Danco, all these former defense contractor company. So again, what I'm trying to get you people to understand, Mr. Ja, that aid money that goes to these African countries, the implementing partners is the one who disburse those funds. They are the one that carry out those projects. So when you want to count aid money, that is why I told you guys, let's source the funding. You have not been able to do it. You can't tell me, say, Doe got military aid. Okay, so Ellen got medical aid.
George, so you don't know the numbers. The same way you are explaining about what went into Ellen money, can you say the same thing about how
I cannot count aid money again, Mr.
Exactly.
I will speak to what the government borrowed.
That if you don't have,
the United Party government borrowed $874 million.
If you don't have the numbers just like me, if you don't have the numbers just like me, let's leave it as that.
We are boasting of international airport today that's 60 million, Dennis John.
No. It's not the point. That is beside the point.
Those are the money we took.
It is not about what you did with the money. We are not talking corruption here.
You can be.
His question was how much
people
was
make this
by the
statement. Give us the sources of the funding.
Right. No, give me the sources if you want to prove this. But
no, Mr. John, again, you can't agree to something that you have no knowledge of. I will make that very clear with you. As a journalist, you should not agree to something if you don't have the facts on it. That is my position. You can say you agree that the United Party government received more money than any government, but you can't source the money. That is absolutely wrong. So if you want to do that, it will be your responsibility to show us.
No. It's your responsibility because I asked you, and you did not. I said his question was, did the United Party get more money? You said no, it was the Doe government that got more money. Hold on now, let me finish. Hold on. You said it was the Doe government that got more money. So where are the facts? What did you show me to prove that?
500 million in direct assistance the Doe government received from the U.S. government. You challenge that?
And how much did the Ellen government receive?
Why I told you there's no direct assistance. The $25 million that were given to Ebola, apart from that, and the $270 million through the MCC grant.
Oh, so the direct assistance for Ellen government is zero. Is that what you said?
No, I didn't say zero. I said we received $25 million Ebola. We also signed the MCC compact grant, which we received in 2015, $257 million.
Mr. Lobbo, let's move on.
No, we do not set the record straight. We should not move on. Let's educate the people. We should not just move on. You can't cut it off. Mr.
Lobbo, we got to move on. We are out of time.
So don't agree with him again next time, okay?
Oh no. No. Don't tell me what to agree with and what
you
not to
can't
agree
agree that we receive more money when you don't have the facts on it.
with.
This is my challenge on it.
The facts you are presenting are just a matter of your opinion. Where your sources?
But then, Mr. Jordan, that means you need to read on it. We received 257 million in 2015.
Because that's what you want to say. But let's move on.
No. Let's set the record straight.
There's no record there to set straight. Let's go to our last segment.
You don't know that we received $257 million in 2015?
George, we got to move on.
No, I want us to set this record straight. You don't know that
no
we received $257 million.
George, you are only talking.
Do you know that we received $257 million?
There is no record here to set straight. You are only talking.
The compact grant. I'm not giving you the say.
Let's go to our last segment, Josh.
Okay. And I will still ask this question.
Let's go to our last segment, which is we shouldn't go beyond.
Let me give you I will post the link for you, the MCC compact grant.
George,
just for the records.
George, we got to move on.
No, but we can move on. I'll just post the link for the ordinary librarians to see.
Right, and that link does not give us any breakdown of which government and what they receive. Will you compare the Doe administration and the Allen administration? We're only posting a link. We got most of these links. But let's go to our last segment here, which is the Tabata session.
It's too late, baby, but I don't need your Tabata. Baby, oh, your Tabata. I'm gonna go away, your Tabata. My baby, oh, I don't need your Tabata.
At this time, we come to the section that says Tabata first in the Southeastern language means absolute nonsense. So every week we look at what is nonsense in the country, and this time we start with Mr. Sherif. Mr. Sherif, for 1 minute, what is the Tabata of the week?
So in Buchanan, there was a group of thugs that went out to vandalize the Liberty Party headquarters that was recently renovated by Musa Ability in that city. And they sprayed paint all over the place. They did some damage to the windows and the ceiling. This is sort of reminiscent of our troubled past. I mean, why do the first thing that people want to do is to damage infrastructure? So I don't think, and then, of course, the name that's been, that they're tossing around is Yombly Conga Lawrence. And this is a sitting senator who has never made any statement condemning this violence. This is violence.
Thank you. Mr. Lobbo.
For me, I think the Tabata of the day was the Minister of Finance. Okay. I think someone already shared it for him. I was about to post it for him. Thank you. So I was about to share, but let me say this. I think the Tabata of the day for me was the Minister of Finance telling the Liberian people recently that the Liberian people should wait for the rainy season in the next 2 months. That we have to make hard choices, knowing that there's 24 hours electricity at his house. I think that was a complete mockery to the Liberian people. The fact that his government have recorded record-breaking revenue, and the Minister of Finance will tell the people, should we pay $10 million to the Côte d'Ivoire for current for 2 months, when you guys can just ride it out for the next 2 months in total darkness until the rainy season? I think that was complete. Based on what you said, Tabata is complete nonsense. I think that was complete foolishness on his part. So that was the Tabata for me. Thank you, whoever shared the link. I was about to post it.
What is this link about compact agreement that you built?
I just wanted to make sure that whatever number I'm giving you, I'm not speculating.
The U.S. and the Republic of Liberia signed this agreement to fight poverty. I mean, what does that say?
No. Dennis, let me explain to you what that means.
No, it doesn't.
Wait now, Mr. Ja. This is let's this.
Let me give my Tabata of the 9, and we
go ahead. Now we'll go to it.
Right, because
finish.
My Tabata is the Koji graduation. It is not so much about someone graduating, but what is it with our country that we get a job before we go for the training? So if this man was appointed mayor and he's working already, Now he's going to go get a degree in public administration. I think
Right.
this whole idea of working backwards for me is complete Tabata. Well, gentlemen,
That's excellent.
for 30 seconds, let's go through our closing comment. But before that, I want to tell you that Friday is our literary hour. And the literary hour is every Friday at 6 p.m. And on Sunday 12, we're going to continue with the literary hour 12. They're going to be interviewing Mr. Greg Mittman, who wrote a book about Firestone. And you don't want to miss that. So you have the literary hour on Friday at 6 p.m. and you have part 2 on Sunday at 12 noon.
And that will be the interview, correct?
Yes, the interview is 12 noon.
On Sunday, okay.
On Sunday. Saturday at 6 p.m. we have the Liberian History Channel, and we're going to be doing part 2 of the birth of the African Republic. Historian Carl Famile and Jason Carr will be here. Then on Sunday at 6, we're going to have the FOL Justice Forum. This time, our lawyers will be discussing the Liberian civil justice system versus the Liberian criminal justice system. So they have a difference. Come right here, and we're going to be discussing that. Don't miss it, always on Focus on Liberia, where we educate, we elevate, and promote all things Liberia. Gentlemen, time is fast spent. I didn't imagine that we could be here for over 2 hours. Let me get your closing comment for 49 seconds each. Let's start with Mr. Sherif.
I want to be quick, Dennis. Please allow me to do this.
Okay, go ahead.
It's important. The MCC, which is the Millennium Challenge Corporation, is the program through which the United States government have decided that this is the means by which it will help emerging countries. What it means is
Is that your closing?
Mr. Yeah,
you have 45 seconds.
That's
Go ahead.
fine. That's fine. I just want to provide this general education for the public. What that program does, there is a set of criteria that a country must meet. The fight against corruption, the rule of law, there is a score. When you meet that score, the U.S. government gives you a grant. And that is what the MCC grant we got in 2015. I want to say thank you, Mr. Ja. Mr. Sherif, it's a pleasure to be here with you today on this platform.
Thank you.
I want to thank our audience. Those of you callers who agree and disagree with us in your comments, I want to say thank you. Thank you, and Focus on Liberia. It was a wonderful time being here with you. On this note, to those of you at home, fellow Liberians, the sooner we get rid of George Weah, the better your life will be. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me throw in a few Tabata here from our guests. Samuel Sakama, my Tabata for this week is Cummins ANC supposed MOU with Musa Bility. What was Cummins thinking? William Domase, Dennis Job, behave yourself, man. Do you do your homework ahead coming on the show, or ahead of coming on the show? I think she meant that. Samuel, you got two. Okay. James, Jimmy Eastmont, my Tabata is Liberian politician put their selfish interest before Liberia, manifested in the collapse of the CPP. CPP is not going anywhere. And soon as here, my Tabata, the UL was closed in 2013, 2014 due to the Ebola epidemic. But Jefferson Koji has gray sheet for 2013, 2014 academic year.
The man was studying online, man. The man was studying online.
Mr. Sherif, your conclusion or your parting comments?
Yeah, so every administration stands on the should stand on the shoulders of their predecessor. And so George Weah, everything that was accomplished under the previous administration, should just take the good things and run with them. One of the things that I see that was troubling under Ellen Johnson Sirleaf was the astronomical wages of government officials. It made government really, really enticing. You know, all the sweeteners, you know, the vehicles, the scratch cars and all of that. If those were inherited, those were, you know, the times of the military regime, if this is how they treated their government officials, you know, this sort of luxurious lifestyle. This is not something that I expected. Ellen Johnson, who have fought a long time to, for genuine democracy in Liberia. There should have been some changes. It is too high. The wages are extremely high for a poor country like Liberia. And the legislature, I mean, they're not doing anything about it. They've been paid, they've been overly paid. Tell me why our speaker is paid way more than Nancy Pelosi of the United States Congress. This is really, really unacceptable. It's unacceptable what's happening in Liberia. The people, everybody is fleecing the country. And this is why Liberia is very, very poor. And, I hope that there will come a leadership that's going to do away with all of this and redo.
Thank you.
It's a need for a redo.
Thank you. Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for tonight, for being here. I want to thank our viewers for staying here with us, always on Focus on Liberia, where we educate, we elevate, and promote all things Liberia. Keep it here, and we will do our best to bring you the best. So far, we have the best panelists in the world, and you better believe it because I say so. At
No
this time,
comment.
we want to conclude, and we never close our broadcast without playing for you the song that says, "We are all Liberians." Many would say Liberia is at a crossroad. 2023 election is very critical, and no matter which side you take, whether you believe that the MOU will hold or the CPP will hold, whatever side you take, we are all Liberians.
We are not CPP member. We don't want CPP.
Well, who knows? The CPP, because the Unity Party were going to form a coalition with other parties. Maybe that could be the resurrected CPP. We don't know. But in any case, we are all Liberians, and we must do whatever it takes to make our country a glorious land of liberty. Good night, guys, and God bless.
Thank you.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our home. Liberian people. Liberia.